dais and in the assembly and students. I have met Dr. Mahapatra infrequently, along with Dr. Bika Agarman and Dr. Patnaik in Delhi and Malaysia. And those encounters were brief but emphatically influential. And I remember him as a man of sparkling humor, deep compassion, and as a humanist. And like Dr. Patnaik and other friends here, I remember him for combining passion and intelligence, ethos and pathos, in via contemplative art and via active art. That was his unique quality. And he's politically described in the words of Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, was defining a gentleman. He acted but claimed not. He quickened but owned not. Merit he accomplished but dwelt not on it. Since he didn't dwell on it, he could never live it. And Dr. Mahapatra he set his sights away from the colonial roots of research. I recall that he would always talk about freeing the state from the thrall of colonial legacy and freeing the tribal from the thraldom of the state. And this had a clear ideological background because he was also set his face in the entire history of Western philosophy. For instance, Hegel would say that the Indian soil is barren. It doesn't bear flower and fruit. It bears flower and fruit only when the logos seed is transplanted to the soil, fertilized by the Judeo-Christian stream of thought. In the same way, Paul Hacker was a scholar of Advaita Vedanta. He said that rationalism and naturalism, these are alien to the Indian soul and mind. And therefore, the logos seed, like Hegel, cannot but be barren in its own soil. It will be fruitful only when it is transplanted to the Judeo-Christian soil, fertilized by its philosophy. And one remembers that when Boswell presented the book on the voyage to the South Sea Islands by James Cook to Johnson, Johnson said, "Don't hunt in defense of savages." Boswell said, "But they have the art of navigation." Oh, even a cat can swim, a dog can swim. They also have the art and craft of doing beautiful things and carving Oh, even a cat can scratch, and a child with nails can scratch. So this was the perception of the primitive. And Dr. Mahapatra defined himself as a post-cultural primitive, defining other cultures. And when he spoke against colonial philosophy, one should also not forget George Orwell, who in his Marrakesh mentioned, oh, there are all these people, so many brown faces. Are they really individual? Are they really individual, or are they kind of an undifferentiated brown stuff without any identity, as individual as corals or insects or bees? So this was the burden against which Dr. Mahapatra stood, and he wrote the banquet of people like Gandhi, who said that in exchanging colonial rule for an independent country, we should not exchange king law for king's talk. And we should really recall Gandhi also about his mention of whom he called the saints, the Shera, the barber, Sajana, the butcher, Gora, a potter, Raidas, a cobbler, Kamela, an untouchable, Tukaram, a kundi. This was his list of saints. And Dr. Mahapatra also spoke about Rajmohini Devi's Sabha for the tribal people in Sarguja, in Chhattisgarh, where she fought for tribal rights with intense passion. And his recollection about his intellectual background will be incomplete without fleshing it out by what he actually meant by all this. How do you decolonize development? First of all, he went beyond statistical enumeration of attributes with which most anthropologists and archaeologists are concerned even today, to qualitative appreciation of the ethnic groups, their problems, and their struggles. He also, secondly, engaged in a multidisciplinary study. It is a cross-sectoral study. He combined action anthropology with population demographic anthropology and with field studies which were into micro-regional variations in resource management and subsistence approaches. And he derived lessons from those approaches for adoption on a larger scale in the area of governance. As regards governance, we know that he spoke about this tribe, caste, king continuum as against Robert Redfield's caste tribe continuum in the Yucatan. And this continuum theory is fleshed out by extensive examples from within Odisha. Whether it was the princely state of Rajanilgiri, Palaso, where he was born, or whether it is Khurda and Puri, the king serving as the kind of a vice regent for Lord Jagannath, whether it is the Shabara, Kond and Bhuiga headmen crowning kings of Mayurbhanj, Bonagar, Keonjhar, after local deities, tribal deities, who would regard their palaces as Rashtra Devatas. And they would crown the king with the Sualata jungle creeper and steary leaf umbrella, which was more precious than a crown of gold and diamond. And these had wider ramifications on embers that Jagannath Puri, the original Sevaiyat, was the Shabara, Vishwavasu, and that the Shabaras had retained the right to be one of the 9 privileged Sevaiyats of Lord Jagannath. And that tradition also continues in Chhattisgarh, in Shavari Narayana. And not only in Orissa and Chhattisgarh, but in Jagdalpur itself, the king is the Rathapati, acting for the Lord, the goddess Galdeshwari, and the Maula Devi, and the Gondi Ramayana doesn't show Ravana as a villain, but as a king of regal qualities. Lakshmana doesn't rescue Sita. Sita rescues Lakshmana. So then, since Dr. Mahapatra went over a larger domain of Southeast Asia, look at Korea, where the princess of Ayodhya went, and after a shipwreck married the local Silla prince of Korea, along with her gift of Shamana's sutras, and there the kingdom was born. Similarly, in Champa, in Thailand, in Indonesia, you have this, Dr. Mahapatra talks about it extensively, the cult of the king being sanctified by the local Brahmana, and the cult of the Lord, the king, is identified with the cult of Lokeshwara and Shiva in a Shiva Buddha cult. And we have enormous iconography showing that phenomenon and the ramifications of that phenomenon in Southeast Asia. So, in Central Asia, I excavated a site in Bala in Chhattisgarh, where the Rudra Shiva image was associated in inscriptions by the king. Like here, the Shashana villages and the Kula Behara Brahmins are also associated with the royal installations and temples and establishments. And this image went through many mutations through Central Asia and was transformed into Bodhisattva in the Longman caves of China, just 50-60 years later. So this journey, what Dr. Mahapatra foresaw and foretold, has not been charted. Because he was talking about a kind of a cultural translation without objectification and without commodification. And that cultural translation was carried out by people like Atish Dipankara, who were designated as Lotsavas, intercultural translators. So Dr. Mahapatra himself was in that tradition of an intercultural translator. He was a Lotsava, so to speak, born in the, functioning in the 20th century. So when we talk about this phenomenon, we should not forget that you are not only talking about the kings and the central authorities, he was also talking about local governance. And whether it was about the Pori Huya at Bunai practicing treatment of diseases, sanitation, and collection of food. Whether it was shifting cultivation in Saura Hills in Ganjam, whether it was fishing in Chilka Lake, or the knowledge of the Bonda tribal in the Bonda Hills about preparing for natural calamities without government law. That was one way. Then he was examining the efficacy and the viability of the devolution of authority to local bodies. So he looked into the Rourkela still region. He looked into sterilization, performance of women leaders, Christian Urons, and ashram schools in Gram Panchayats. And he examined whether the women had got their rights, whether gender equity was being followed, and those researches remain to be followed up. He left these clues, and the clues, enlightened the path, but the path remains untrod and untraveled. So it is time that one goes back to Balipatna block and other blocks and looks at his itinerary of ideas and renews his journey to complete and fulfill his research, looking to the directions where he pointed. He also looked into the June cultivation, the non-tillage, non-plough agriculture. Not only here, but also the Daphna Mijis in Arunachal Pradesh. And one knows that the Mos Mai and Mo Bukhar sacred groves are there in Meghalaya. He also looked at the sacred groves, the Debra Kabu, the other practices in South India, and how these sacred groves have preserved the vanishing biota and the relict vegetation more effectively than the forest department with all its paraphernalia of machinery had been able to do. So when he was talking about forestry, he was also looking into rather foresaw the IPR aspect. The fact that the cadastral survey had taken over from plain table survey, and that land beyond 10 degrees slope was being excluded, thereby excluding the land under June cultivation. He found it highly objectionable, that it was violation of the sui generis community, not only intellectual property right, but also right to physical occupation of the land which they have cultivated through centuries, transgenerationally. So he mentioned about thick forest rotation in Kodu, Dangar, Toila, Rami, Dabi, Virigi and Bagata agriculture. Has this research been followed up? No. I mean, it is a normal practice to castigate the tribal approach of slash and burn, as it is called, a culture of destruction. But has there been an attempt to look into the possibility of harvesting its benefits while arresting its destruction? Then he also looked at the sui generis community intellectual property regime. So these are words which we borrow from the Western dictionary, intellectual property and all that. Now, intellectual property in the current Gatree's formulation is a textual formulation. We have to electronically fix the knowledge which is contextual in a text. Only then it is recognizable. If it is oral and contextual, it doesn't merit recognition. Therefore, the entire corpus of indigenous and community knowledge systems in Odisha or elsewhere in the country is ignored. And Dr. Patnaik has worked so much on linguistic diversity. Now that unless one goes back to the local nuances of language and recreates the biocultural diversity registers in the local language, and if one fixes the knowledge in biodiversity registers in the colonial Latin knowledge, how is it useful? I don't think that attempt is being done, is being made by anyone. One keeps sticking. Now Dr. Mahapatra went to Nagpur, but still he deconstructed the German forester Dietrich Bandix says approach to forestry, which he brought with him to Dehradun. A forestry which he proposed to reverse that approach. He wanted to go back from fiscal to non-fiscal forestry, from plantation forestry to assisted natural regeneration. Which was what the tribal was doing. They were watching and allowing the nature to take care of itself without tampering with it, removing the brambles, removing the bushes, removing the thorns, but allowing the nature to take its own course. We practice some of it in Chhattisgarh, but it requires dedication. And you cannot ensure a continuity of education in a government structure so easily. So it is not as if he was only talking about the practicalities of the IPR regime, or in forestry, or in agriculture, or in mining, or in any other area. He was also looking at the ideological background. So when one is talking about the Jogriya Cone in Niyamgiri Hills, or in the Gandhamardhan Hills, he is talking also about the invasion of aluminium, hydro, steel, refinery, bauxite mining against the Niyam, the law given by Niyam Raja Peku and Dhardi Pennu, which people have forgotten. That ethic is known locally, that ethic is practiced locally. It has no place in the government dictionary. So if the students are interested, they should go back and see how this local intellectual ideological regime can be restored. When Pratibha Roy, she attended my last lecture, talks about the Kondo Highlanders from Adibhumi, the tribal land, and creating a Sindhi Bagi, a stone platform from where the tribal community communicates with gods to plan and shape the land and the future. She is not talking through her hands. She is talking about real practices of the Kondo Highlander, which is rooted in intense empathy with nature. So one has to talk about the nutritive, generative forces of nature nurtured in the forest. And Dr. Mahapatra was interested in that. Forest as a nursery for affinity, kinship, consanguinity, and livelihood, which was also combined with the stalk of the grain, sound of the woodpecker, growl of the tiger, hum of the river. The intangible and the tangible came together in the perception of that consanguinity of nature, which cannot be captured in the IPR regime today. But we have done nothing about it. So, when Dr. Mahapatra was talking about IPR, he was not talking in colonial terms. He was talking in post-colonial terms about combating the theory of eminent domain, which was used by the British people to preempt right to occupy the land. And that eminent domain was expressed, it is known in international law, to the principles of terra nullius and res nullius. Any land which is kept unoccupied is that of the government. Any land which is vacant, the state has the primary right. The nation or the global corporate industry has the primary right. Not the local person, because it's empty. It's free for all. Has anybody followed up those intellectual property right principles which were adumbrated in his thesis for correcting the government textbooks? So, what Dr. Mahapatra was doing In fact, he was doing the same thing as Justice Hidayatullah did in pronouncing the principle of lex loci, res ide. It was a historic judgment which talked about the law of cultural and environmental self-determination, the law of the location, the law of the place, which was given by the community to itself. Has that principle been followed up? The students have to understand and go back and try to ensure that the practices are transformed and the culture. Then his excursus in Southeast Asia, with all these Shiva's Hatara Guru and Shiva Buddha things, and creation stories of Northeast Indian tribal groups, providing clues to their transborder migration routes. So his research in Asia and Southeast Asia is a pointer to renew the walk along the silk, textile, spice and slave routes, to recapitulate and recollect the intercultural translations which was taking place in those days. I have traveled across in this Bactria, Martiana, Taklavakan desert area. There are hundreds of coastal cities. There are hundreds of museums with Indian inscriptions in Kharosthi and Brahmi. There is an entire 36-line inscription on the Chinese wall from the Suvarna Prabhasattama Sutra, which talks about the Dharini Sutra, which talks about the protection of the kingdom from enemies. Is there anybody who is traveling those routes of Central Asia and Asia to renew their understanding of what Dr. Mahapatra's attempt to transform the target text into the source context was? So, similarly, look at this tsunami and this management wetlands, waters, etc. Whether these are tidal peaks, estuaries, lagoons, marshes, sandbanks, stubble fields, tidal mudflats, and gravel bars. Dr. Mahapatra was looking at the local knowledge of waves, currents, riding different kinds of surf in different kinds of boats, using nautical technology. I mean, he didn't say all this, but you have to understand and follow it up. Whatever he was trying to do. How the storm surges in the Sundarbans are contained by sandbanks, and how those sandbanks and the Badaban, and how their destruction should be stopped from the invasion of trawlers and fish farming, aggressive fish farming. So those are lessons which have to be replicated also in the Malgujari, Jamindari, Jagitdari, Muafidari, Inam forests of central India, which were abolished these rights in 1961, along with the Chernobyl land. Now to go back in central India from teak, saja, bija or sag trees, all colonial ventures, to shrubs, bamboo and other local species requires your look at the silvicultural practices. And so will there be follow-up work in this direction? So what I would like to say is that to move from cytogenetic, phytochemical in vivo, in vitro, in silico research in laboratories to look at the ground itself, the ground where the tribal has lived in an affinity and consanguinity with nature through generations. To look at their understanding of ferns, marsh, shrub, vine, game, waste, dairy, their knowledge of bacteriology, entomology, geology, open pollinated land basins, which they do not articulate in so many technical words. They articulate in the language of the women, and there are these practices which like Narwa, Garwa, Gurwa, Bari, etc., which are being revived in Chhattisgarh. So, what I am trying to say is that we should now understand that Dr. Mahapatra's venture had not only a wider global relevance, but also wider global support. For instance, in Africa, the Xhosa community has created the epigram. I am because you are, not because I think. A bird builds its nest with another bird's feathers. Hands wash each other. Then similarly, the Bushmen in South Africa. There are novels about how they have lived and died in the soil, which is fertilized with their bones and also with the carapace, the remains of skeletons of other animals which are shown in the rock art there in South Africa. How the South African novelist Jex Meta finds these rock art patterns in the cracks in mud, coca-bone branches, tortoise carapace strewn over the grasslands. How the Greek-Canadian author Thomson Highway described the Greek-Canadian playing the loon cry, wolves at nightfall, wind sighing through the pines, and the flight of white Arctic terns. And how the benefit sharing principle in intellectual property right has been accepted in the Inuit Trust Fund for the Raglan mining project in Quebec, Canada. How in cases like Bulen Bulun and Milpururu, the tribal has won against the state for their intellectual property right against misuse of their rock art designs in the for commercial purposes. Or how in the Mahapatra Declaration in Aotearoa, New Zealand, they have talked about a collective right regime for the tribal through a cooperative rather than a competitive framework, a retroactive coverage on the multi-generational span of their works, extension of the first beneficiary right to the direct descendant of the traditional custodians of the knowledge, and a moratorium on the commercialization of genetic materials in their custody, pending development by them of appropriate mechanisms for using them on the ground. So these are the principles which have to be boosted against the nationality and territoriality conventions of the state and the captives regime. And these are the interregional variations in productive relations, resource mobilization, cultural and environmental strategies, which have been pointed out by Dr. Mahapatra, which have to be followed up. His approach that this nature is an inaccessible trust fund. It cannot be treated as a currency of high immediate value. Has to be appreciated. That shrinking forests, thinning soils, falling aquifers, collapsing fisheries, this phenomenon, rising temperatures, can be stopped if we accept an ecological rather than technological civilization. And therefore, to move towards the conclusion, we are talking in Dr. Mahapatra's terms about a sustainable materials economy which makes the most of existing materials instead of using most materials. We are talking about the human being as part of the wave of the nature, not as its weaver. We are talking about the home and heart of the tribal community, not as a dome, a catchment, a range, a timber mine, a carbon sink, or an empty land for development. It is occupied for generations with knowledge and fertilized with emotion and sympathy. So we have to understand the post-colonial reconstruction of the colonial philosophy and the corpus of practices which were developed through the work of Dr. Mahapatra, which is why I have requested his son and his daughter to work on this. Because the retelling, rereading and recapitulating is what is important, not to treat him as a subject for a seminar. Unless we do this, we would not understand the basic principle of Dr. Mahapatra. What he meant is that all Western knowledge is not scientific, nor is all scientific knowledge Western. And that modernization is not to be equated with Westernization. And that, especially when in this era of planetary culture, the West is not fully West and East is not fully East. And unless we remember the lesson which was given by him, we shall forget the warning given by Nietzsche that it is the extinction is the shadow stalking our doors. That this is the Anthropocene phase in which the human being, unlike nature, will be the author of its extinction. And that this extinction will come without the benefit of a nuclear winter, comet shower, or a geological cataclysm. And therefore, to speak after Heidegger and Dr. Kumar, who did not quote Heidegger anywhere, Europe should become a land of sunset to prepare for a new dawn by opening itself up to other great beginnings, like those given by Dr. Mahapatra in Odisha, Asia, and other places. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, sir. I think the entire audience would agree with me that they really enjoyed this extremely holistic understanding of Professor L.K. Mahapatra's body of work. And also I hope that the younger generation will take your advice and your suggestion and take his studies and the path that he has shown forward in future studies. Now we will have the felicitation of the guests, and I would humbly request Professor D.P. Patnaik, who is not only my father's very dear friend, but he has been a constant support for us and we all know him as an eminent scholar, literature, Padma Shri and whatnot. But he is Devi Mosa for us, and it will be an honor if he can please come up and felicitate the guests. We will now have the vote of thanks by the granddaughter Deepsha Dhar.
A very good evening, everyone. As we come to the close of today's memorial lecture in honor of my grandfather, Professor Dr. L.K. Mahapatra, I'm filled with a deep sense of gratitude. On this special occasion marking his birthday, we gather not just to remember a man of immense intellect and compassion, but to celebrate his legacy that continues to inspire us all. First, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Kalyan Kumar, for delivering such a thought-provoking and insightful lecture. Your words, sir, added a new dimension to our understanding to the fields of Professor Mahapatra, who was very passionate about these areas. It is truly fitting that we honor his memory with the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. I thank Padma Shri Professor D.P. Patnaik sir for always supporting us and his constant guidance. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Vice Chancellor, Utkal University, Professor Savita Acharya for chairing the meeting, Professor K.K. Mishra sir for sharing his memories, Professor Devendra Biswal, HOD, Department of Anthropology, Professor Prasanna Patra, Professor K.C. Sarpati, Professor Nabanita Rast, Chair, PG Council, faculty members and students of Department of Anthropology for all their support. I would also like to thank the members of the L.K. Mahapatra Memorial Trust, Professor K.K. Basa, Professor A.B. Ota, Professor N.C. Das for their dedication and their hard work in making this event a success. It is through all your efforts and hard work that we have come together today to remember and pay tribute to a great mind. A lot of thanks to the Light and Sound Department, Rama Babu and Krishna Babu. We have with us today very eminent and distinguished guests. Like the Vice Chancellor mentioned, we have at least 3 or 4 generations of anthropologists amongst us. A very special thank you to all our guests and attendees for your time and for your presence. Whether you knew him personally or have come to know of him through his work, your presence today is a testament to the impact that he has had on so many lives. Lastly, I would like to thank my family for their unwavering support in keeping his memory alive. Thank you once again for being here and for your participation in the memorial lecture. Let us continue to honor Dr. L.K. Mahapatra by carrying forward his ideals and passion for knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepsha. And keeping in line with Professor L.K. Mahapatra's tradition that everybody just mentioned and Professor Mishra also mentioned, please have some refreshments before you leave. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming and gracing this occasion. It is really a privilege to have you all